Genesis 26:27 and Matthew 10. In Genesis 26, there's another famine, different than the famine in Abraham. This one's with Isaac. He goes to Egypt, and Abimelech is there. So it's like round two. Well, round one for Isaac. Abimelech has got to have seen this play before. Isaiah comes with his wife Rebecca and says Rebecca his sister. So same thing Abraham did. Isaac says that Rebecca is his sister, even though it's his wife. And maybe Abimelech seems like he would have seen this happening before, but I don't think it goes directly to Abimelech. I just think that they're in the area trying to keep a low profile, but it gets word to him because Abimelech says that even though this wouldn't have been him, apparently he didn't maybe directly have or know of interest in Rebecca, but he says someone from our tribe or whatever could have easily taken Rebecca. And he said, you would have brought great shame on us. So he sends out Abraham and Isaac and Rebecca with lavishments very similar to how Abraham left. So maybe at this point Abimelech's kind of like, I know how to handle this. Let's just keep things moving along, move them out of here. If I give them some things, they'll go, and maybe he didn't want to disrupt his power source, his power hierarchy. So that's 26 for the most part. Isaac prospers greatly. This causes envy among the Philistines. So I guess where Abimelech is now the Philistines. And I guess he was around them for a while, so he sort of came in, maybe they said kept your distance, but he grew incredibly wealthy and powerful within their own land, and this caused envy, so they asked him to leave. And he did. In 27, we're back to Isaac, his intent to bless Esau. So before Esau and Jacob were sort of quarreling over a birthright, which got traded for a bowl of soup, a bowl of stew. And now Isaac says to Esau, go out and hunt game. I like to eat your game. It was known that before. So Isaac is old and kind of dying in bed, it sounds like at this point. So he tells Esau to go out, hunt game, bring it back for him, prepare it for him, and then he'll give him his birthright, which is separate from what was it they were quarreling over before, the inheritance, birthright or blessing. So there's a birthright and blessing, which are two different things. So this is over the blessing. So Isaac's wife overhears this, who's already known to favor Jacob, and tells Jacob that I heard them over talking. I overheard them speaking, and this is what's going to happen. So we're gonna devise this plan where you are gonna pretend to be Esau, and I'm go out and get two goats, and I'll prepare them very similar to how Esau would, and then we're gonna take the hair of the lamb, the goats or whatever, and put it on you because Esau was hairy, and we're gonna fool your father into giving you his blessing. So they do this, and it works, even though Isaac was skeptical, and he was skeptical because he heard the voice of Jacob. He heard his voice and said, this voice doesn't sound right. But when he touched his arms, it was very hairy, so he assumed that it was. Now you might say, well, how could someone be fooled this easily? But mind you, at this point, I think he's over 130 years old, and he can't see. So his senses are definitely somewhat deprived. But the correlation I have here is that they brought him the food that was very well prepared. And at that point, he was skeptical, but the food was right in front of him. So he kind of said whatever. And it was just, I think he was weak and he was tempted. I know it sounds silly to be making such a big decision over something so small, but I think in life we often do that. And if you look back, Esau sold his birthright, traded it in a pact or covenant agreement, a contract with Jacob over a bowl of stew as well. So as ridiculous as this sounds, I think it is sort of there's a correlation and there's a little bit of a testament to the fact that oftentimes we will make long-term decisions hastily that are not in our best interest because of how we feel in the moment. So he traded the birthright for a bowl of soup. Was it the birthright? Yeah, it was the birthright. And now the father gives the blessing. I think he's skeptical, but I think he's old, weak, and in bed, and the food is right in front of him, and he's kind of like, hey, this is how it is. And he wanted to eat. So he gives the blessing to Jacob, and then immediately after Jacob leaves the room, pretty much, maybe minutes, hour later, or half hour later, Esau comes in with the food all prepared, and this whole thing blows up. There's strife, everyone's upset. Yeah, Esau was stewing, no pun intended. The only thing that comforted him was knowing that he was preparing to kill his brother Jacob. He sought comfort in the planning that he was going to kill Jacob. That's how angry he was. So Matthew 11, Matthew 9. And Matthew 10. So there's 12 apostles. Simon, who's called Peter, Andrew, their brothers, Simon and Andrew brothers, James and John, their brothers, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, James, Thaddeus, Simon, and Judas. He sends out the 12 apostles. It doesn't say in Matthew that it's 2 by 2, but I know from a different chapter that it's 2 by 2. It sounded like. Sends them out to go do things on their behalf. And the takeaway I have here, I think, is that it was probably one thing to be traveling with Jesus and performing these miracles. Like, this is Rock Band tour, and it's cool when you're not the one leading it, but you're sort of right behind him in the wings, and you're traveling in this entourage. And it has to be and you're watching Jesus perform all these amazing miracles. So Jesus says to the 12 apostles that the 12 disciples or apostles, 12 apostles. He says to them that now I'm going to give you the power, and you're going to be able to do the same things that I was doing. But it has to be so much different for them to go out into these places that are not only reluctant. I mean, Stephen, the first person who believed in Christ, was killed. It didn't end well for any of the apostles. So it had to be incredibly, incredibly hard. Now that you're out there on your own, they're pretty much out there on their own. Fortunately, they were 2 by 2. It sounded like, so I think they had a little bit of a support system. But I can only imagine, basically, is things are a lot different when you're not when the band isn't all together. And are you still gonna perform and do the same things that it would, like they were right there with the king himself? So I just think that on the one hand, it's cool, they had the power and now they could go out and do all these things. But the reality is once you're out there and you start walking alone, or you're down from 12, 13 of you, and now you're just 2 of you out there, it's a big difference. So sometimes I just think about what they were imagining now, that not everything is being recorded, it's not all being documented as well, and they really are sort of out there on their own. And I guess it's just sort of how we have to keep our faith. It's like sometimes at church, like you feel empowered that there's everyone around you who is all moving in the same direction, has the same beliefs. But sort of once you leave church and you get back in your car and you go to work and you're back out there, are you still keeping that same faith and alive? And do you still have the same feelings that you had when you were in service worshiping?